The Montreal Canadiens have started a rebuild this year. A rebuild that's going to take multiple years to finish and get competitive again. But the one big question for the Canadiens right now is who stays and who goes by March 3rd?
Well, I think a big part of it is what players are really attractive to other teams. I think of two right off the top of my head in Joel Edmondson and David Savard. Two big, strong, weighty defensemen with really good contracts. Edmondson with 1 year left, David Savard with 2 years left. So when you start to think about teams trying to position themselves better, I see those two players as really attractive players. I know they have a young defense, and I know those two have been significant in helping insulate the younger defensemen. But if you're looking at where the rebuild is headed, and you're right, Mike, it's a number of years away, these are two players. There's other players that Kent Hughes was counting on, maybe performing a little better, and maybe in recent days, recent games, maybe he's going to be able to make that come to fruition.
Well, I think that's just it. Because you mentioned the obvious ones. They're not pending UFAs, but they probably would have value on contracts that are digestible. But I think Kent Hughes was really planning on Mike Hoffman, Denny Dadanoff, Jonathan Drouin, all having pretty good years under Marty St. Louis, an offensive coach who could light them up so much that they could trade those guys and get something back. With Drouin and Dadanoff both being pending UFAs, they're going to trade them for whatever they can to whoever they can. They have had an uptick in play as of late, which would make them a little bit more attractive. Mike Hoffman has a little bit of term left on his contract, but the guy I'm curious about, Craig, Josh Anderson, a really good player who has a good contract. You know, he's in his mid-20s. He's got several more years left, and I know they don't want to get rid of him. They want him on the team. But if he's not going to help you when you finally get there, is it worth taking a look at it now? If the value is high and you get the right deal, to me, I think he is. Not because I don't want him, because others do want him as much as they do. And if you can pull something out, clear out contracts, clear out cap space, then you can get more aggressive and be more creative heading forward.
Absolutely. And when you think about Josh Anderson, and you think about the playoffs, you think about speed, you think about hard play, you think about determined play. That's where Josh Anderson really shines. And I think for teams that are looking to add that type of element to their group, Josh Anderson fits the bill. I think if you're going to trade for Josh Anderson, you have to consider what he is as a player, what he is as a regular season player. You think back to Claude Lemieux, and Josh Anderson isn't Claude Lemieux, but Claude Lemieux was the prototypical playoff player. And people would say, why doesn't Claude do that during the regular season? Well, Claude was what Claude was, but he didn't need much of a nudge to be a top performer come playoff time. And Josh has shown that in his brief playoff appearances. And for a team that wants to add a hard player, a skating player, a player that makes opponents uncomfortable, Josh Anderson would fit the bill in multiple ways. And the return for the Montreal Canadiens could be significant.
Yeah, and you can be greedy on Josh Anderson, right? You don't have to force that deal. But I think, Craig, for everybody else, you're going to want to be stubborn, but when it comes right down to March 3rd, you're going to trade guys kind of for what you will get back. And hopefully the value's enough that there's some competition there. But I do think changing over some of these established players, even ones with term, is pivotal for the Canadiens and Kent Hughes in the next 2 weeks.
Well, and it is. And when you think about their plan, very well laid out, very well articulated, very transparent. Aside from Josh Anderson, the blue line is really strong. The forward group with Caulfield and Suzuki leading the way, really strong. Slavkovsky obviously out. So their plan is coming to fruition. It will take some years, but the bottom line is how they maneuver here at the deadline will continue to set them up for that future.
Yeah, it's going to take a while, but I do think if they're lucky and successful the next couple of weeks, could expedite the process maybe by a year or two.